I opened my eyes and realized that I had been transported back in time to my future wife's school years. But this time I was determined to change my path in life. Before I was just a quiet observer, but now everything will be different. I watched her walk away then, accepting the life that was meant to be hers. Even in this youthful beauty, I saw no one who was worthy of standing next to me. I'm ready, ding ding ding, dong dong dong, the school bell rang clear and loud. The entire campus suddenly came alive, filling with the usual noise and bustle. But the bell instantly suppressed the roar and a disciplined silence reigned in the hallways. And so, day after day, the school routine passes. The time for rest in class was gone forever. The last shadows of students gradually faded into the hallways of the school building. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. It was as if I'd been reborn to experience that forgotten taste of youth. The sound of my classmates' footsteps and the hushed conversations faded. At that moment, the world around me seemed to fade, turning into a faceless crowd. I calmly leaned back in my chair, settling into the back row in the corner. My place was almost at the very edge, out of everyone's sight. No one cared about me. I kept my eyes on the front door. I watched the girl who just walked in. Her name is Liu Ruyan. It's a beautiful name, isn't it? I smiled faintly, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. My face froze into its usual mask, then I turned away, pretending to be completely immersed in my thoughts. She has a surprisingly graceful nose. Today, her gaze seems a little more thoughtful, but the clean lines under her eyes remain. There's no point in trying to figure out what she was doing last night. Among hundreds of students in the same uniform, she is in no way inferior to the others, but at the same time, she cannot be confused with anyone else. She is the pride of our school, the best student in the natural sciences stream. We study in the same class, and this is the same girl who will become my wife. No, this time everything will be different. Her life will take a completely different turn. She will become a bright star in the aerospace industry or a respected physics professor. Perhaps she will be able to achieve heights that others only dream of. But she will never be my wife again. She would never get involved with a scoundrel like me. My seat in the back row was a refuge for me. I didn't want to look at her anymore and forced myself to look away. She was wearing a neatly buttoned, long-sleeved uniform. Our teacher entered the classroom briskly, clutching a stack of papers. His face was unusually serious. "Students, we have a surprise test," he announced in a dry, emotionless voice. The silence in the classroom exploded with a disgruntled hum from the students. I just sighed quietly without protest and took hold of the handle. I was ready for this test. It was a kind of resignation to fate, to be honest. The most annoying thing about going back to school is the endless cycle of tests and big exams. I sighed silently. I laid the textbooks on the edge of my desk, which was cleaner than everything else. Finally, this burden of knowledge was over. However, my knowledge still seemed useless. The teacher shouted out a surname, Liu Ruyan. She stood up confidently as usual, walked up to the teacher's desk and took the worksheets. After quickly counting them, she began handing out the options to her classmates. Having handed out the papers, she returned to her seat and, leaning back in her chair, habitually picked up a pen. She straightened up, tore a sheet of paper from her notebook and placed it on the desk. A wave of despondency swept through the classroom. Only she and I remained completely calm. Of course, she was confident in her abilities. I knew perfectly well how many points I'd get. You can't expect much from someone who's long since graduated. It wasn't difficult for me to write a paper on mathematics, even after so many years. The rustling of papers filled the classroom. Liu Ruyan returned to her seat. A student at the next desk muttered something. She only smiled slightly at him in response, raising her hands. The sleeves of her uniform had slipped down slightly, revealing her wrists. As the rustling of sheets of paper approached my desk, I couldn't help but glance at Liu Ruyan again. I couldn't help myself. It was like a slap in the face from reality. The pain in my chest grew sharper from the flood of memories. Finally, mastering my emotions, I made an effort and focused on the paper. My previous plan was ruined. I looked up at the board again. The paper with the assignment was approaching. I kept an eye on it, even from a considerable distance. When it was close, I noticed a scar on the finger of the hand that was handing it over. I instinctively touched my hair, remembering my habit of fiddling with a lighter or cigarette. Oh. In my past life, I barely studied, acquired a bunch of bad habits, and got by delivering newspapers. But I never expected that Liu Ruyan would turn to me and, lowering his voice, quietly say, "Take it, this is all." Having said this, she quickly turned away as if she wanted to hide from the world. I only smiled bitterly at my thoughts. Well, that's it, excellent, only fools would enjoy this scribble. Heh, I lost any enthusiasm after a second. I felt like the eyes of the top students turned to me when they noticed that my sheet was blank. The teacher frowned. His face hadn't been very appealing before, but now it became even more stern. I thought for a moment. Should I even try to smooth out that grimace on his face? But as soon as I remembered how much I would earn on the stock market in the future, I immediately dismissed these thoughts. To hell with it all. After all, swearing isn't my style. I have nothing to worry about in the future, even if all I feel now is dry lips. I gave her my brightest, almost boyish smile. I noticed her frown deepen as if expecting a trick. My smile faded immediately. But I didn't expect her expression to momentarily change to something resembling confusion. What am I doing? I didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. I didn't do anything against Liu Ruyan. At most, I simply observed. She was simply something sacred to me, the first thing I wanted to touch. This thought pricked me. My breath caught in my throat. I lowered my head and muttered under my breath. Liu Ruyan, in this life you will never have anything to do with a scoundrel like me. I sat there, lost in my sad thoughts, trying to heal the wounds of the past, when suddenly an uninvited guest appeared before me. The white sheet of paper with the assignment stared at me, causing only a headache. I looked up, involuntarily meeting Liu Ruyan's gaze. We looked at each other emotionlessly. "Write this first, I'll bring you the other one later," she snapped, bowing her head slightly. Her hair, like butterfly wings, fluttered as she moved. I was so angry with myself for my weakness that I could barely keep my hands from shaking. I finally remembered when this rebirth occurs. It turns out Liu Ruyan had always been so kind to all her classmates. I opened the notebook. He tucked the piece of paper into his pocket, avoiding Liu Ruyan's piercing gaze. Then he glanced slyly at the teacher standing at the board. In any case, I had no intention of doing this assignment. I was too lazy to even start. I jotted down a couple of sentences just for show. My movements attracted attention, and many students who had previously tried to remain inconspicuous began to secretly watch me. I'm a diligent student, honest with my teachers. At least that's how it looks from the outside, but I've always been inexplicably drawn to girls like her. In my past life, even when I was a bad boy, I was constantly surrounded by young girls and couldn't do anything about it. Naive, it's always easy to get attracted to problematic guys like me. Liu Ruyan was still standing nearby. I didn't react at all. With her glasses, she looked like a typical nerd. Damn, she's so cute. I'm so tired of this attraction to her. Afraid of losing control again, I shook my head. When my classmate got angry at my inaction, I simply decided to leave the classroom. After all, I was always a bad student. It's not that I can't understand the subject. It's just that, even without studying, I didn't want to disturb others. Approaching the door, I waved to my classmate. It was a farewell. No wonder I'd seen Liu Ruyan so often in my past life. What a fool I am, I thought, angry at myself, and left the classroom. My classmate's gaze seemed to follow me like the light of a burning candle. The first thing I did was head to the teacher's lounge. After hanging around there, I approached the school gates, covering my face with my hands, but did not have time to leave the grounds. The guard blocked my path. I looked down and suddenly remembered everything. I was wearing that same school uniform. We spent a lot of time together. He said both good and stupid things to me, but he just didn't want to let me go. Something in his hand, something like a fork, still loomed before my eyes. There was no break. I looked at his tobacco-stained fingers, took a cigarette butt out of my pocket, and slowly lit it. Then, while he was still in shock, I flicked my wrist and threw the cigarette away. A graceful arc cut through the air. The tip of my cigarette landed right on the newspaper on the guard's desk. Yes, those were my 3 minutes of freedom. While the guard was distracted by his tea, I tried to finish this episode. He looked at me, and in his eyes I could see only the anger I had left behind after my escape. I didn't run far. I turned around and looked at the school building towering above me. I placed my middle finger on my forehead. I saw my youth again. Okay, the first stage of my plan is complete. The sky turned morning colors, street stalls began to open. The sun was merciless and the aroma of food wafted everywhere. The scent lingered in my nose. I suddenly realized that my stomach was growling, reminding me that I hadn't had breakfast yet. I turned over all my underwear and pants, but only scraped together a few small change. I was catastrophically poor as a child. It doesn't matter though, formalities are more important now. The horizon loomed before me, clouds floating high in the sky. I only just got back. I couldn't even remember where my dog was at the time. I spent a lot of effort trying to piece it all together. I tried to tear reality from these vague memories. The alley turned out to be quite narrow. The trees on either side of the road looked very old, some had already fallen over with age. I lightly brushed the shoulders of the few passers-by as I passed. Yes, it's that same old, run-down neighborhood. The walls are almost destroyed, but the scribbles I drew as a child are still visible. I jumped onto the roof of the building. In front of me was a battered wooden door. Taking a deep breath, I kicked it. All that was heard was a dull thud. I felt a slight numbness and a sharp pain in my leg. And yet I went inside, feeling fear grip my body. I was so scared. I was incredibly scared. I was shaking. The fear didn't let go. It literally paralyzed me. I was horrified. Fear, pure fear that could not be overcome. This feeling filled everything around. I felt truly creepy when I entered my room, despite the chaos that reigned inside. It seemed pretty clean compared to what was going on outside. I turned the mattress over and groped around on the floor. As expected, there was nothing there. After a long time, I realized he had already spent the money from his past life on booze. I just smiled bitterly at my own naivety. When I let go of the edge, the thin mattress fell back with a thud. The dust on the nightstand had disappeared, meaning someone had hidden money there. And this man wanted to hide it from me. The old man was lying on the sofa, his clothes scattered around him. He shook a bottle of beer contentedly, his face flushed with alcohol. He looked at me with an unperturbed expression. My fingers slowly clenched into fists. When I felt the pain in my palms from the nails digging in, I realized that I was standing right in front of him. Before the old man could open his mouth, I grabbed him by the chin. He jerked, demonstrating his drunken aggression. I didn't hesitate for a second, waiting for him to spill out all his drunken nonsense. I roughly and directly snatched the bottle of wine from his hands. The liquid in the bottle foamed violently. My hand shook with rage. I poured the wine straight into his mouth, showing no mercy. The old man's eyes widened in shock. He tried to resist, choking, but he was no match for me. From a very early age, my strength was superior to his. "Where is the money?" I growled. "Where did you get the money for the wine?" I asked, loosening my grip so he could breathe. "How the hell dare you treat your son like that?" The old man got furious and tried to get up from the ground. He swung to hit me, but he was too drunk. His legs gave way and he fell back with a thud, the remnants of wine making everything around him sticky and disgusting. And that nauseating smell of cheap alcohol, it made me sick. I was too lazy to continue the conversation with this useless drunkard. Before he could get up, I pulled his hair and poured the rest of the wine in his face. The wine spread across his clothes in a dark stain. The old man finally realized the enormous gulf between us. The instinct for self-preservation overcame the craving for drink. His fingers, clinging to my hand, weakened. The old man's eyes were bloodshot. I saw myself in that basement, at once calm and mad. I stood face to face with it. With a cold face, I asked again, "Where is the money?" The old man looked at me with undisguised horror. I squeezed his hand tighter. He finally came to his senses. I subconsciously touched my clothes. The money was hidden here. I rummaged through his things and finally found those red tickets. There were quite a few of them. I glanced at the empty bottle lying on the floor. Suddenly, I was overcome by a feeling of emptiness. That's exactly how I felt at 18. I was used to such scenes, because in the future I had a wedding planned with Liu Ruyan. That old man was still trying to beg for at least a little warmth or pity. I was deeply disappointed. No one around knew about my life. I didn't understand what he was thinking. This man only cared about money. I stood up. I looked down at the old man. I was disgusted even to see him. I simply pushed the door open, walking out while he muttered something behind me. I was very excited, and for some time, I just ran without looking where I was going. The police on the streets became stricter. My restless heart finally calmed down, especially when I raised my eyes to the sky. I noticed a thin crescent moon in the sky. I felt calmer. I raised my head and looked at the night sky for a long time. But as soon as I turned around, someone's shadow covered me. I said, "Mr. Security Guard. You weren't at the gate. Why are you here?" He didn't say a word. He just grabbed me by the shoulder as if pinning me in place. I became very scared. I had a bad feeling. I turned around and saw the face of my former classmate. There was another person standing next to him. They seemed very familiar to me. As they led me back to the school office, I quickly realized who it was. It was my former director. "It's been so long since I've seen him. You're so..." The director was furious. He pointed his finger at me. I couldn't utter a word. After so many years, I heard that name again. I was a little confused. Old memories came flooding back. The director had been drunk since the day he registered his residence. The entire staff simply couldn't stand his antics. Apparently, that's why he rewarded me with such a name. In my previous life, after Liu Ruyan and I started a relationship, I got tired of being a good boy. He gave me a new nickname, which he still remembered. There's a unique culture here. It took me several days to come up with a decent name. Hiryuo, that's what they called me. They threw me into the corner and I sank to the floor in front of them. While participating in this conversation, I kept my eyes on the director. I was completely confused. My thoughts were jumbled. I made an indefinite sound. The White House appeared before me right in front of the top boss. I even patted him on the shoulder. Who would have thought that his gaze would suddenly? I pretended I didn't care and just nodded. Then, under the watchful eyes of the director and the boss, the situation looked extremely strange. Long Fei and Feng Wu were holding documents in their hands and my father simply watched them. They were both silent for a moment, their breathing quickening. I didn't scold them. My father is a heavy drinker. He never cared about me when I said this. Their looks instantly changed. The principal who had just been scolding them suddenly softened. If you don't want to go to school. What are you planning to do in the future? Start your own business. I've already thought it all through, I replied, and we argued for half a day. This time my tone was much more confident than before, but I no longer listened to their objections. He ignored everything. At first glance, it was very decisive. I took the initiative, stepped back, and took the form from the director, their eyes full of pity. I suddenly remembered something and licked my lips. After an awkward pause, I fell at their feet. Director, boss, I ask you. Lend me some money, I beg you. If these people did not have a certain cultural background, I would never have seen such a stunned leader. Finally, I blushed a little at my own eloquence. Smiling, I headed for the school gates, calling to my uncle who was collecting trash to wait for me. Then, under the surprised gaze of the guard, I returned to class feeling wobbly. The exam had just ended. The students were complaining about the difficult questions. When I entered, the classroom suddenly fell silent. He Qiang, where have you been? Someone asked me a question. I didn't care what was going on in that room. I didn't answer. I walked to my seat, took off my school uniform, and started shoveling all the books off the table into my bag. There were so many of them that they barely fit. I picked them up and threw the ones I hadn't finished writing on the table. He Qiang, what are you doing? I opened the desk. The other person's tone irritated me. Liu Ruyan put down her pen. I turned and looked at him suspiciously. I saw a new set of textbooks next to his hand. He was just like that, talented and hardworking. I didn't dare look back at him. The whole class was already whispering that I was dropping out of school. All my books were new. If anyone needs them, take them, I said. Everything went surprisingly smoothly. They were all diligent students. My dropping out of school seemed crazy to them, but I didn't care what others thought. I straightened my school uniform and slung my bag over my shoulder. I felt my life changing. Liu Ruyan looked at me with bewilderment. I didn't even have time to take a couple of steps, when suddenly I remembered something. A woman came onto the stage and smiled at everyone. You are all good students. Study hard. You must follow the example of the best, you especially. Liu Ruyan, keep up the good work. You have a bright future. In my past life, I was simply obsessed with her. Although she liked me, our paths diverged. Until one day, I followed her to another city to work nearby. A year later, we officially became a couple. Now, looking back, I think, perhaps she looked down on me, or perhaps it was the freshness of youth I brought to her busy life as a graduate student, making me something of a rebel. She fell in love with me by mistake, the school's most beautiful girl, and when I was sitting in the back row, such provocations could really easily turn one's head at a young age. Having finished his tirade, I turned around and saw my old classmates looking at me with sadness. Oh no, were they really sympathizing with me? Responsible people, that's exactly what they are. Even when they see me on the brink of expulsion, they continue to pity me. I thought about it. As I was leaving, I heard one of my former classmates say after me, you can use me as an example in class if you want. I promise I won't sue you for disciplinary reasons. When he frowned, I was ready to pull off another trick to make my escape quicker. I predicted his actions and he retreated. I was carrying a bag of books. At the school gates, I was stopped by the security guard who was always meticulous. I simply waved the note in front of him. And then I threw it out the gate. I sold all my textbooks to a junkman who collected trash. Baby, he said. I didn't even bother explaining that I wouldn't be studying anymore. I'm not one to waste time on excuses. I stood at the back exit of the school. It was a real farewell. This time, I decided not to follow Liu Ruyan's beaten path. According to his original path, we probably wouldn't have had a future, and that's good, but I now have my first serious money in my pocket. I explored the city again and finally found the perfect place to start my business. My capital was ready. I shouted to myself, "Boss, my moon plan, Phase 2 is officially launched." That night, it felt like time had turned back. I wasn't surprised to meet that same old lady out for an evening stroll. After tidying up the room, I went out into the street without hesitation. I was full of determination and wandered through the neighborhoods thinking about my strategy. By the way, I needed to check my business empire. Where to start, I just kept going. It got dark. I took a bite of the bun I bought. That's how my dinner went. Who said we're doomed to be poor? The test is passed. There's no turning back. I was driving my battered car, lurking around the corner, waiting for Liu Ruyan to appear. She ran home with a backpack in her hands. I watched her from behind the wall and stared at her open backpack. And into the jacket she was wearing, a tear involuntarily welled up in her eyes. Liu Ruyan had always treated her books so carefully. I was at a loss. I grabbed a piece of wood lying on the ground and clutched it tightly in my hands. Someone's head appeared in the alley she had just come out of. I rushed there. I saw 3 blonde boys and realized their intentions were far from academic. Her pink wallet was lying on the ground. I understood everything instantly. Liu Ruyan was robbed. Damn it, those 3 bastards, those blondes spotted me. I threw away the cigarette butt I was holding in my hand, straightened my school uniform, and got ready. They seemed to think I was easy prey. I crushed the cigarette. I walked straight towards them. At that moment, when they mistook me for a random passerby, I threw a handful of dust into their eyes in a rage. I pulled out a broken wooden stick and greeted them with a deadly greeting. In my previous life, I was destroyed along with Liu Ruyan, but now everything will be different. I tried to avoid fights because my lover didn't like it, but after so many years, my skills were a little rusty. Damn, it took a lot of effort. I touched my split lip and ran away. While running away, I accidentally stepped on a dog and it chased me all over the street, but oddly enough, it helped me. I got to her house before her and dropped my wallet on the road. She always passed by that spot on her way. I saw her pick it up. I didn't say a word and turned my back. Touching the wound on my lip, I looked up at the smoke-filled sky and walked away satisfied with the result. I finally invested my startup capital. I put it into a small kiosk at an intersection near the school. Not only is there a lot of traffic here, but also a great location. If I want to change places, I can always go away on my little tricycle. But I never thought that I would accidentally meet my boss here and treat him to a sausage. I deliberately added some hot sauce as a token of gratitude for his support. Seeing his hesitation, I realized he was still hesitant. I simply placed the sausage in his hand and moved on to other customers. The flow of people was simply shocking. My counter was full. I looked at my former classmate standing next to me. I chewed a piece of starchy sausage. "You're asking about the startup? Just do what you've got in mind," he said cautiously. I was afraid he'd start ranting about my poor prospects again, but his lips turned red from the spiciness of my sausage. I was being completely frank, but my classmate's expression remained complex, as if I'd done something unthinkable. "Don't look at my counter so skeptically," I thought. "I earn a lot of money every day. I will soon return to you everything I promised," I continued to say. This is the future. The taste of this simple starchy sausage was truly superb. The boss wiped the sweat from his brow. I ignored him, shaking my head, hesitating for a long moment. Finally, deep in my soul, I heard his question, "Are you really deciding to give up your studies? What's the point? What's the point of cramming if you can't find a job later? Better to get out into the real world and start doing something yourself," I replied, continuing to clean the baking sheet. Observing the empty counter, I felt the psychological tension melt away. Usually, this was rush hour. "Why don't you come and see me this evening?" I was so bored that, wiping the oil off my hands, I continued, "The most important thing is that I still don't have money to pay for my studies. In my past life, I secretly earned extra money washing dishes, but the old man took everything. In that life, I clung to my status as a student. Although I wanted to stay in school, I couldn't. Studying just wasn't easy for me. In this life, I finally realized everything and saw everything in its true light. I put myself in order. I looked at my clothes and noticed the students stealing glances in my direction. This upset me. Why don't they just fit? It seemed to me that I accidentally met the gaze of the teachers who were whispering about something without expressing any emotions. I didn't care whether they were happy or not, and I simply thrust a sausage into the teacher's hand. "He Kiang, I don't need this." "If you don't take it, there will be no business," I added. The teacher didn't immediately understand what I meant until he saw the crowd of students streaming in. It turned out my authority was intimidating these children. Students are always subconsciously afraid of teachers. Finally, the crowd surged again. I was so busy collecting money that I barely had time to serve the customers. "So, old teacher, how did the last test go?" I asked casually. "Ah, well, everything's fine, he replied. I listened to the teacher's words, his expression especially pleased. He held the starchy sausage high in my hand. I still had a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't expect my old teacher to be willing to help me attract clients, so I pretended to ask again. "First place, as usual, goes to Liu Ruyan." "That doesn't mean that only Liu Ruyan is capable of this," he replied, although his tone suggested otherwise. There was pride in the teacher's voice. I just nodded, correct. "Liu Ruyan has always been so capable. If she hadn't married someone like me in her previous life, she wouldn't have allowed me and the child to drag her down. She had to take a high position so that many would look up to her." I thought about this as I looked at the exam board. The hot oil on the pan was scalding. I saw a dark-haired student standing before me, and suddenly remembered, today is not a day off. "Boss, shouldn't you be at class?" "Boss, I can't do this alone. Just offer me your free hand and help me with the money," I asked. "The seniors are going on a field trip today. We just got back and I was a little rushed," he said, admitting he couldn't help it. These students were completely out of shape and moving slower than me. As soon as I heard this, an unpleasant feeling came over me. I looked up and saw the teachers standing with an arrogant look and waving from afar. The oil that splashed on my hand also got on his sleeve. At his signal, a whole group of students appeared on the square. I briefly spotted Liu Ruyan in the crowd. She was talking to her classmates, expressing her thoughts with gestures and smiling a slight, shy smile. It's rare to encounter such a relaxed atmosphere. I quickly bowed and returned to work. An impatient customer standing in front of the counter called out to me with a sullen look. I buried my head in my work. "Hey guys, come here, over here," the teacher shouted loudly, getting everyone's attention. This made everyone turn around. I looked at him and bit my lips slightly. I noticed him looking at me with a smile. "Isn't that He Kiang? Long time no see." "Yeah, you never get used to that in class," I replied, putting on my standard advertising smile. "Please help yourself." I wasn't as polite as I had been in class. "I'm afraid your grade point average has improved significantly," I joked. My classmates clapped me on the shoulder. A storm of applause erupted. "Today I treat you all. I've paid for the entire exam for the course. How much would you like to eat?" I just wanted to say to He Kiang, "Wow, this class is absolutely great." "Thank you, great, thank you, He Kiang," someone suddenly shouted from the crowd. As a result, everyone started thanking me. A lot of dignitaries gathered around and everything became a mess. I thought that if I had donated the school building, I would hardly have been able to get in there so easily. Noticing that he was looking at me with curiosity, I looked back and quickly looked away. Then I looked at that young and tender face and smiled widely. "Don't be shy. All my classmates who want some, everything's free, take some if you're hungry." "Wow, you're so cool." Yes, the people around me were so sincere. My classmate sitting next to me wanted to say something, but I was faster. I grabbed the sausage and shoved it right into his mouth. The students were so delighted and embarrassed. They insisted on giving me money and I couldn't stop them. These people were ridiculously greedy and lazy. They were embarrassed to take the money just like that. They insisted that I put the bag away and preferred to take the bills personally from my hands. When I felt awkward, I simply shoved the exam paper right into his mouth. Honestly, it was simple and effective. I'm not a good student, but I have a great sense of people. I'm a simple person without ulterior motives, even if a classmate is on my side. I'm still busy, my gaze glued to the golden, crispy food on the right. I carefully picked it up, spread a layer of tomato sauce on it, and sprinkled it with chili powder. "Liu Ruyan, this is for you." When I said her name, I felt my heart pound. Liu Ruyan looked a little surprised. She took a bite with a smile in her eyes. She doesn't like spicy food. And yet she can't hide her sadness. In a past life, I took her to restaurants and always ordered something spicy. And then another serving not spicy. "Wow, Liu Ruyan. You're absolutely perfect this round, really." Liu Ruyan took her first bite and her eyes turned red from the chili powder. She involuntarily stuck out her tongue and I feigned surprise. "Hey Liu Ruyan, look like you're lucky. Thank you Liu Ruyan for your beautiful eyes." She suddenly beamed like a blossoming flower and her eyes flashed with golden light. In my past life, I liked to tease her. When she was tired, I would take off her glasses, kiss her eyebrows, look her straight in the eyes, and hug her tightly. At those moments, Liu Ruyan was truly happy, but when she touched me, I felt like a ferocious thief. I rubbed my ear several times, looking at myself from the outside, and I couldn't help but react. Today, I was wearing a white vest and a long-sleeved shirt over it. The contours of my chest were slightly visible. The oil from her belly soaked her clothes, making them stick to her skin. It can't be helped, it's a commercial competition. If it weren't for my appearance, my business would be worse than my competitors. Liu Ruyan, you need to study harder. Hearing this, she laughed, she smiled, politely threw something over herself, lowered her head, and did not dare look at me anymore. Until the older generation dispersed and took their army away, all I could do was stealthily and greedily watch Liu Ruyan. Her ponytail was raised very high. She was full of confidence. In her, I saw no trace of the suffering that had haunted me since birth. In my past life, I couldn't find a decent job because of my poor education. So I went to the city where Liu Ruyan was studying and started my own small business. We were the same age. She was a student. I was a budding merchant. The story sounds romantic, but no one around us believed that we would last long. Even I often doubted my life because Liu Ruyan was too good for me. After class, she always came to my counter to help. There, I met her classmate, a rather generous guy. She took my hand and confidently introduced to everyone that I was her boyfriend. Even if people hadn't said anything, I myself would have decided it was a flower that went to a cow. But Liu Ruyan didn't care about such things. However, I didn't want her to suffer with me. I worked myself to the bone every day. Liu Ruyan was incredibly shrewd and saved every penny. She noticed I was having problems and asked her family for money. I still don't know how she convinced them. But when I saw her red eyes, I gritted my teeth. I swore I wouldn't let her suffer because of me anymore. I spent all my savings. Using my own money and funds received from the Liu Ruyan family, I opened a closed factory, intending to establish my own production and to emit a loud dragon roar. In those years, Liu Ruyan always insisted that my life was too hard. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't sense that the situation was becoming dangerous. That was where our treachery lay. We made plans for the future. I didn't expect to become a little famous. Later, Liu Ruyan gave birth to a child. We paid all the money for her education from a joint account. Our days went fairly smoothly. When Liu Ruyan stayed home with the child, we got married. The property titled. Her parents' names were listed. After all, I'm an old man. I don't need anything from this property. But when Liu Ruyan was preparing for the live broadcast, she discovered she was pregnant again. It was the fruit of our love. After discussing everything, we decided that she would give birth and began preparing for raising her. But everything toxic, as usually happens, didn't go according to plan, and my plant. Due to problems with raw materials, the products became impossible to sell. Everything was stuck in the warehouse. I was on the verge of madness. Liu Ruyan often blamed herself for this. I couldn't share the family's burden with her. I was sad. She always bore it all alone, crying in secret. In the future, Liu Ruyan gave birth to a daughter, but her fortune was already ruined even before that. Only now have I realized how terrible her psychological illness is. Countless regrets. Why didn't I, her husband, notice this sooner, even though she's still so attentive to me? To relieve my worries, she always smiles, but deep down I know it's all just talk and laughter. The crisis at the plant leaves her helpless. Her academic research had failed. As a mother, she hadn't made any mistakes, but all of this weighed heavily on her. She had become the head of the family. Liu Ruyan. She was such an amazing person, but she was trapped in her own home like a wilting flower. The whole world around me seems to be crying. I thought for a long time and finally understood. Jiao Yue Gaoxuan Qing Hui Yi, a good man like Liu Ruyan. She shouldn't be oppressed by her family. She's not just so-and-so's wife. She should simply be Liu Ruyan. Only Liu Ruyan, not anyone's wife or mother, although the stars are like the sky. She shouldn't have gotten involved with someone like me to begin with. The shadows of her classmates gradually faded. I stood motionless, looking at the crowd full of energy. Boss, give me a sausage. The buyer gave me 3 yuan. I happily took them and asked what else he wanted. I was busy until dark. I was about to close the stall when I saw an old man staggering towards me with a bottle of wine, taking huge gulps. He was breathing heavily. I accidentally picked up a plum. I didn't expect that this drunkard who had been drinking all day would be able to find me here. And besides, came so late, you dog. You dare trade here, take it, he said, grabbing my little tricycle. Looks like he wanted to take my car. I almost laughed. He thought there weren't many people here and I'd be afraid to fight back. Funny. What I regretted most was that he had arrived too late. I grabbed his wrist. I stubbornly twisted it. The old man behind me screamed and started cursing. I easily pulled him aside. I had no right to let him trade. I didn't need his things. Besides, I bought the goods with my own money. The old man had to leave on his own. His eyes were looking at me from under his brows. At first glance, I felt uneasy, unexpectedly. He fell to the ground and started rolling. Hey, help. The son doesn't honor his father. He's killing him. Come here, everyone, look. He grabbed his hands. He kicked the ground constantly, raising dust, and then began to shake himself off. All our clothes were covered in mud, and a crowd had gathered around us. There was a little sympathy, a little cold indifference, but no one dared approach. I simply watched this spectacle in silence. I watched this absurd drama in a past life. When I was at the factory, that old wretch did the same thing. He'd go looking for Liu Ruyan in public, dragging her into a showdown to completely ruin the factory. Go get drunk again, although Liu Ruyan heard what I said. How old is this old creature? But he still hasn't gotten any smarter. He can be so stupid. I still remember. Liu Ruyan's condition slowly improved. She took the baby outside but was treated like a child. According to people around her, before she married me, Liu Ruyan was always basking in praise. She had never been subjected to such humiliation. The old man's cries. A shameless face and memories from a past life mixed together. My numb heart. I was overcome with irritation and grabbed him by the clothes. I picked it up from the ground. My eyes were full of rage. I warned him, try again, the bigger the better. Let everyone see what a local drunk you are. You didn't raise me at all. I almost laughed. I've been suffering for 2 lifetimes because of my so-called biological father. You took all my mother's money to drink and gamble it away. I only survived thanks to good neighbors. You didn't raise me. Don't expect me to provide you with a dignified old age if you appear before me again. I'll sue you. Have you forgotten how much money you stole from me? The old man was shocked by my words. Public opinion around him began to turn against him as soon as I let him go. He fell to the ground, but as soon as I turned around, there was a sound of breaking glass as the old man grabbed a bottle of wine. He spat at me. I simply stood motionless, staring into his mad eyes. My heart was filled with nothing but deep disgust. It's incredibly annoying. This is life. It has no meaning. Maybe death is a good thing. Then Liu Ruyan's life would be completely separated from mine, turning into parallel lines that never intersect in this noise. I had a false appearance. In my previous life, I appeared to Liu Ruyan exactly like this, broken. That's when I told her. He was hunting for my life like a rat. He poked me in the face, forced me to look into his eyes. So serious. Tell me, don't let others interfere with your life. You have your own life. Even if it's in ruins, it can be taken away. Then he kissed my eyebrows. She whispered in her most tender voice, darling, you're not a bad person at all. Her body's reaction at that moment outpaced her thoughts. I instinctively recoiled, as if the ghosts of the past were pulling me back toward that sharp, broken bottle. Eventually, the glass pierced my body. Warm blood began to flow. The color red seemed to sober the old man. The alcoholic haze dissipated somewhat. Reason returned to him, and he began to tremble. He dropped the bottle, fear frozen in his eyes. I couldn't help but grin. He's always been like this. Even his own relatives run from this scum. The day will come when he'll start to fear me. But what exactly? Is he afraid I'll turn him into the police? I'm covered in blood. I looked at him with an icy gaze. I felt almost no pain. I pressed my white lips together. I nodded to him one last time, confirming my words. Don't you dare cross my path again. Otherwise, if you try to harm me again, I swear you'll spend the rest of your life behind bars. The old man grew nervous and swallowed nervously. The smell of wine on the ground mingled with the smell of blood. This conflict was disgusting. I'll never set foot there again. Didn't they see that someone had called the police? I was being kind by reminding them of this. I only threatened the old man with a stick but didn't even dare to come closer. I simply threw the shards and the glass aside. Right in the trash can next to my tricycle. This old wreck was ridiculously naive. I just scared him and everyone around me. What do they care? They won't intervene anyway. Who has the right to call the police? After all, this is a family dispute. I rushed to the hospital. I treated the wound on my hand, but when I smelled the pungent smell of disinfectant, A strange premonition gripped her heart. In her past life, Liu Ruyan had suffered from postpartum depression. Back then, I refused to admit I had any psychological problems. I had to run to the doctor every 3 days, and so on many times. I even got the doctor's link to his social media. He told me something important. No matter how much a family cares for a pregnant woman, she can still develop depression because childbirth is a very serious test. After giving birth, women are physically and emotionally exhausted. They must immediately care for the baby, who is especially vulnerable. Family support is essential. Sometimes mere presence is not enough to fill the emotional void if a woman does not receive adequate social support. It's easy to feel alone and helpless. Every time I think about it, I feel uneasy. I want to say to myself, what a wonderful husband you were. He's a real scoundrel, but Liu Ruyan. She was sick herself, but she always consoled me, saying that she understood how hard it was for me then. My darling, damn it, how can she be so holy? I left the room. When I returned home, I found dog excrement in my tent. I almost threw up. Smelly animal, it's taken to shitting here. I was lucky. I often called this place a dog's nest. I never thought a dog would actually show up here. She made a toilet here. I slowly cleaned up after her. He lay down on the edge of the bed, looking through a crack in the tent. I made a small window to look at the moon. The moon, how peaceful. Please protect my beloved. May she live a peaceful life and never face troubles again. See you soon. After graduating from school, I met Liu Ruyan by chance and decided not to run into her again. After the entrance exams, I saw her again. She came to my counter. I was shocked. I immediately decided to move somewhere else. I continued to hide until she left for university. We never crossed paths again, and it was for the best. Finally, a bright life begins for Liu Ruyan. The days drag on so slowly. It's been 2 years, 3 months, and 5 days since I last saw her, to be honest. I didn't want to memorize these numbers, but my brain seemed to be keeping this diary on its own, as if I'd awakened some kind of talent within myself. As a result, a review from a school diary pops into my head. Good guy, 2 eyes, 1 bruise. I'm still the same person. Boss, come on, quality test. That familiar voice again. I took the goods. I took the money with one hand and handed over the purchase with the other. I watched as old acquaintances reached for the hot food. I offered him a bottle of water. Old man, you are too kind. How do they find me no matter where I move? These years I've been trying to escape the past. I constantly change places at parties, but I always try to get a good position. Students enjoy discussing me. I was pleased and grinned. See that slightly bloated beer? That's called trading skill. Looking at his increasingly thinning face, I involuntarily advise, you're not a boy anymore, eat less of that nasty stuff. Something heavy, be careful. In the end, he didn't even notice how I extended my hand to him. I had to give him a gift, invite another guest. I pulled a red box from under the counter. Surprise flashed in the boss's eyes. His look said, give it to me. Yes, that's right. Didn't you call this poetry? I'm afraid I can't handle such a gift. I'll lose face. No need, hide it, he said, but it was clear he wanted to accept it. Oh, that child at heart. Watch what you're saying. The boss threw down the bamboo stick, carefully wiped his hands on his pants, and nevertheless took my gift, an expensive pen. Hey, I like it. The boss was delighted. Even the hair on his head seemed to stand on end. I stood there dumbfounded. After all, it was just a small souvenir. What was it about this that brought him such indescribable delight? The other students stood nearby, empty-handed. How can this be? I thought, but having such a kind heart is more important than anything. I pretended to be busy and erased the notes from the board. And then I changed the subject to Liu Ruyan. As soon as I said her name, my thoughts immediately rushed to her. This student was very proud and successful. The seniors were excited because Liu Ruyan would soon be coming again. I heard she did very well in college, and that was absolutely true. Liu Ruyan is simply amazing. She's always been the best, of course. The boss examined the pen again and again. Finally, he squinted, trying to decipher the English text on the barrel, and moved his lips several times. He couldn't read a word. I genuinely didn't understand what he, a math teacher, was trying to do. And when he saw English words on the handle, he suddenly exclaimed, "Oh." I don't know what touched him so much. Maybe he remembered something while looking at the gift. Did he burst into tears? I just wanted to comfort him. I just looked at him. He turned to the TV, his hands shaking. Why is this pen so expensive? Are you crazy? Take it back. Back off. The boss, holding a phone in his hand, looked confused. He had a pricing app open on his smartphone screen and was frantically trying to stuff the expensive pen back into the box. But he couldn't do it. Keep it for yourself, I said. You don't know, but I've been in sales for a very long time, using experience from my past life. Besides trading sausages, I learned a lot more. You could say I set trends in the market for a long time and accumulated a fair amount of money. I even have a factory in the area, a legacy of my past efforts. Now business is more of a hobby for me, moreover. The boss had been so busy all these years. Come and take care of my affairs, he'd say. His golden reserve really needed support and under my influence. The boss finally put his pen in his pocket, finding peace of mind. Thank you, Hekyang. A lump nearly rose in my throat. I've already corrected you many times. Call me Hiryu, don't call me by that name. The boss nervously fiddled with the pen in his pocket. He's Hiryu, I muttered with trembling lips. His strange tone made me wary. I rolled my eyes. The boss sat down on the flower bed behind me. We have much to discuss. How did you remember the name of a man like Wen Zhuju? I didn't know you were such a cultured person. Hee, the name is really nice. Liu Ruyan gave me this name in my previous life. Hekyang, my mother's pride. It sounds so intelligent. The boss nodded. Sounds like Angie. Are you from around here? You have an accent that reminds me of the past. I almost stared at him. I was completely confused. How could he know that? In my past life, I constantly pestered Liu Ruyan to come up with a nice name for me. She'd think for days and come up with options. The name Hekyang was originally a joke because I wouldn't give her a second's peace. She stroked my head and told me I was completely unbearable, but I knew she loved me. I understood all the torment hidden in her heart. That name still touches me. Maybe there's an unspoken connection between people who were once close. I looked up at the sky. I decided to close the stand immediately. I cleaned up the remaining sausages. I gave them to the boss as a gift. This is my devoted wife. You won't get the boss to pay out of his own pocket. I got into my favorite car and drove away. I stopped at the bridge. I found a bag of dog food in my bag. Unneeded things, old sheets, all of this came in handy for a dog nest. I was about to call my Wanwen team. But before I reached the booth, I saw the figure I dreamed of. I asked God, why is Liu Ruyan here? I, being a cautious person, quickly hid behind a tree. Liu Ruyan, as she had before, took off her glasses and adjusted her hair. She was radiant with incredible beauty. Liu Ruyan, don't be sad. Uncle will be fine, I heard. A girl stood next to Liu Ruyan. She was playing with the dog, and doesn't that face look familiar? She was a close friend of hers. I remember that affair. I saw Liu Ruyan, but not her. She lowered her head and there was a slight melancholy in her voice. Subconsciously, her eyes were full of emotion. Her light eyebrows almost broke my heart. I took a picture of my head to remember this moment. I remember my dear father-in-law from a past life. What happened then? Liu Ruyan suddenly took a long vacation and left in a hurry before I could even stop her. My factory had just started operating and I couldn't keep an eye on her. I had no choice but to stay, so I transferred all my money to Liu Ruyan's account. Later, after my persistent inquiries, she confessed that her father had fallen. Liu Ruyan's parents were ordinary workers. Working at a factory is a constant risk, and my father was always climbing high places. It was an accident, I frowned. My fingers clenched tightly into fists. Liu Ruyan just shook her head at that moment. She patted her dog on the head, took a deep breath, and walked away with her friend. Her shoulders were slumped. I waited a few minutes. I made sure they were far enough away and climbed down from the tree. Seeing myself again, an old acquaintance, I couldn't help but grin. My Wang team immediately surrounded me as I stood by the pool, cigarette in hand. I touched the dog's head. It felt like Liu Ruyan's hand, in a past life. Even after his fall, my respected father-in-law refused to take my money for treatment. He was afraid of my resources. Liu Ruyan has always been humble around me. My beloved is so kind and her parents are wonderful people. I did everything I could to ensure Liu Ruyan didn't become a beggar. I secretly called my father-in-law and said that I had come to repay a debt, the money that Liu Ruyan had borrowed from them. I also signed a loan agreement with Dai Lixi, fulfilling my promises. My father-in-law was stubborn, but he nodded. Lin Liao didn't forget to warn me if I ever offended his daughter. He'll break my leg. All my parents were honest people. They would rather sell all their property than ask friends for help, come to think of it. I had a headache. I was so angry about the situation, even though I respected my father-in-law very much. I immediately called the factory, demanding payment for the order, got into the car and rushed to the supermarket for expensive gifts. I drove straight to my boss's house. I remembered that old closet very well. I had two gifts in my hands, one for the boss, the other for his wife. I didn't forget to be polite and say hello to their son. I have no other talents. But being thick-skinned is my everything. Otherwise, there wouldn't be Liu Ruyan, this wonderful cabbage, in my life. As soon as I made my request, the boss playfully slapped me on the cheek. My nervous expression disappeared. Heck yeah. You can't say that like that. You scared me. I thought you came to ask for some kind of trouble. Hee hee. Okay, it's all done, my dear father-in-law. Your son-in-law from your past life has come to save you from the fire. I've brought a gift box from the factory. All the fresh sausages were left with the owner. When I left, I looked at the boss's grandson. Kids, study hard, otherwise you'll end up like me. Before I could finish speaking, the old man kicked me out the door. The sound of knocking on the door was mercilessly interrupted. I looked at the blessing hieroglyphs on the door and was again grateful to the boss for the free advice. I refused to take copyright fees, true, but I was still worried about Liu Ruyan. She is too strong. She likes to do everything herself. It must be really hard for her right now. I racked my brains, which had never been involved in entrance exams. I calculated everything down to the last detail and started keeping watch at her friend's house. I knew where she lived from my past life. I didn't expect to become so rich. I spent my whole life in poverty. Finally, I saw her coming out. I grabbed my clothes and pulled the chain. He buried his face in the sand, fell down, and pretended to be engrossed in his phone. Wow, there's a free balloon at the playground. And the Ferris wheel is free. Wow, what luck. I watched my girlfriend's cold face, but there was no reaction. I quickly darted into the hallway, turned my jacket inside out, and came back. Luckily, I'm cunning. The clothes were reversible. I ran up to her friend, pretending to be a random passerby. Oh my god. There's a free ball and a Ferris wheel on the playground. How lucky. I saw her friend's face light up. I hid in the hallway again, switched sides of my jacket, and came back. I was on top. He ran all the way to her best friend's house, continuing to play the role of a passerby. Oh dear. Everything is free at the amusement park. You only get one life, you have to make it. I quickly took off my coat. Passing by her friend, oh my god. Since everything is free, I need to go with the best sisters. While I was thinking about this, maybe I should just come back with the loot. I finally heard her calling, Liu Ruyan Yan Yan. Let's go to the park, just without that Ferris wheel. Liu Ruyan seemed to disagree. But the friend began to beg, behaving very sweetly. I beg you, Mommy Yan Yan. Just come with me, please. I saw her smiling. I turned around and went upstairs. Great, the plan worked, but I still can't contain this feeling of anticipation. A gust of wind blew, and I immediately ducked to avoid being seen. What other gossip decided to gossip about me behind my back? I wiped my nose and put my coat back on. Out of habit, Liu Ruyan. Her makeup usually takes about 35 minutes, so I had time to walk to the set. But I'd already made that walk 3 times while waiting for her. I watched her friend in amazement. She changed and left the building. My god, my eyes widened. I could only watch them ride their rented bikes. I felt so ashamed. Oh no, I've definitely gone crazy. How sad Liu Ruyan must be right now. If she didn't have to put on makeup, she would have left much earlier. My heart was about to burst. I rolled up my sleeves. I started waiting for my car until I saw my friend pull up to her house. I calmed down a bit, but I couldn't stop. It was too much for me. She was a great driver and supported me through my injury. I arrived 10 minutes before them and was already standing in the middle of the playground in a doll costume. And then I saw her. Liu Ruyan had become even thinner than before. My hair was pulled back into a simple bun and there were barely noticeable shadows under my eyes. I took long strides forward. I put a balloon in Liu Ruyan's hand, and then I didn't forget to give one to her best friend. Liu Ruyan was surprised. Her eyes lit up and her breath caught in her throat. It was completely different from the expression I'd grown accustomed to seeing lately. So sad. Thank you, she whispered. She took the balloon and politely approached me together with her friend. She shook her hand excitedly. Look, Yan Yan, I told you there were free balloons and a Ferris wheel too. Come on, come on. I pretended I was just handing out balloons. And I watched them from afar. I heard my friend comforting her. Yan Yan, don't frown. You paid your uncle's medical bills, didn't you? God is taking care of you. Who would have thought that sausage you brought the teacher would win such a prize? What's there to be afraid of? The money is real. Liu Ruyan smiled slightly. She put a sunflower-shaped ball on her wrist. Do you really think so? God really cares about me. Listening to their conversation, I realized I was doing everything right. I ran out of marbles and my heart finally calmed down. Our old math teacher turned out to be a truly reliable man. Hey, I'm a genius for coming up with such a clever trick, but I only had a few seconds left. Liu Ruyan and her friend had already reached the front of the line for the Ferris wheel. I stood behind them. The staff already knew what to do. After all, I had arranged everything in advance and paid. They smiled. "Oh, beautiful ladies. You are so lucky. You are the 100th visitor this afternoon, so the ride is free for you," the staff announced. And they handed 2 flowers directly into Liu Ruyan's hands. Sunlight filtered through the thin clouds. The light fell on her face, scattering golden dust on the ground, the flower in her hand. She gently inhaled his scent. Her movements were so fluid, as if she feared she was dreaming and would wake up any moment. Liu Ruyan's eyes were slightly closed. The face looked incredibly calm and peaceful. In my past life, every day when I was in the shop, I bought her flowers so she wouldn't have to do it herself. Eventually, the shopkeeper began to recognize me by face. When we got married and bought flowers, she even playfully slapped me. Heh, I chose this flower myself. Liu Ruyan will definitely like it. She sat on the Ferris wheel. Holding her friend's hand, she looked down at the playground with a smile. It seemed to me that she was looking for me with her eyes. She raised her hands above her head, expressing joy. I thought she saw me. She patted her friend's hand, pointing to something below. The wheel was slowly spinning. I looked up in silence. In my past life, we were so happy riding on that wheel. "Oh, wheel, please free my beloved from all her troubles." The wheel gradually stopped. Liu Ruyan and her friend walked out. Strands of hair mingled with the scent of flowers in the wind as they passed. I heard my friend say, "Liu Ruyan, you are so lucky." Yes, I think so too. I stood nearby, watching them play and taking pictures. The sun was setting, the yellow light softening. Pink and purple hues appeared in the sky, illuminating Liu Ruyan's clothes. The colors were constantly changing, but the main thing was that there was a smile on her face. When they got tired and were about to leave, I didn't waste a minute. I took out my camera and held up a sign that said, "Free photography." She noticed me. "Are you still here?" Liu Ruyan smiled at me. She looked much calmer and happier than before. "That's right. I've been here all this time," I nodded. I took a photo. Liu Ruyan brought the flower to her cheek. The sunlight filtered through the petals onto her face, making it so tender and touching. I looked at her through the lens. My heart was pounding. I pressed the shutter button. The picture was perfect. Liu Ruyan was beautiful in the photograph. Postpartum depression is too painful, but now everything will be different. After she fell ill in her previous life, Liu Ruyan was constantly worried about something. Once she calmed down a bit, how she covered her face with her hands, cried, and apologized to me. At that time, she smashed every mirror in the house. She couldn't accept her reflection, feeling as if nothing remained of her former body. Her face, once so beautiful, seemed alien to her, and she grieved for no apparent reason. "Thank you," Liu Ruyan suddenly smiled at me. She took a picture of her hand and quietly said something to her friend. I turned around. I looked back and took a deep breath. Then, dragging my aching legs, I trudged toward the playground exit. Immediately after, I removed the heavy doll costume. I collapsed to the ground, my nose hit the dust. I felt sick, my head was spinning. Through the fog, I heard Liu Ruyan call my name. I opened my eyes in a daze. Seeing that she was looking for whoever was inside the doll, I jumped up abruptly and hastily grabbed the head of the costume, trying to hide my face. Liu Ruyan approached me with surprise. "Hekyang, long time no see." She noticed that I was holding part of a doll costume in my hands. The joy in her eyes grew brighter. "So it was you in that suit?" I asked, "Why did you decide that?" and immediately tried to deny everything. But I didn't have time to finish. I saw the venue manager looking out the window and realized the doll costume wouldn't help me anymore. I'm here for work." I looked into her smiling eyes. I couldn't come up with any other explanation. I just looked at her with feigned nonchalance, wrapping myself in my jacket. I didn't care. I desperately wanted her to keep talking to me, but I turned and hurried away, striding past the door. Accidentally brushed against her friend's shoulder. "Sorry." I was on the verge of failure. Once outside, I ran away, trying to get out of sight as quickly as possible. Finally, he dared to stop. He squatted against the wall and wiped away a tear. Suddenly, he sniffled. He sneezed and wandered home. I don't know how long Liu Ruyan will be on vacation, but I still tried to avoid meetings. As a result, for a long time, I didn't go near the kiosk again. A few days later, the old teacher called me and asked if I had died since I had disappeared. He couldn't wait for me to sneak into the hospital to visit my father-in-law. Luckily, I didn't run into Liu Ruyan there. I felt relieved and returned to work. The days became calm again. But news about Liu Ruyan still reached me from my students, and I couldn't do anything about it. The older generation didn't notice anything. My factory continued to operate. Every day I left the house on time, arrived for my shift on time, and then went under the bridge to feed the dog and admire the moon. It's not hard to live in days like these. More than 2 years have passed. Liu Ruyan graduated from high school. She was simply magnificent. My life no longer had those heavy burdens that weighed us down in the past. She managed to maintain her focus. "Boss, are you still coming and helping me with things even in winter?" "Are you really so?" I almost burst into tears. I rubbed my hands, reddened from the cold, and placed a piece of gauze on the floor. I was like a ball, constantly moving. I watched him try to take off his gloves. "Take me a picture, it was necessary." "I'm a fan of yours, why don't you just say, give me a free bill?" "Wow. Boss, do you really need this money? Your account will be replenished while I'm listening to you about work." The boss lifted his chin with glee and bit off a piece of gauze. I immediately broke out in a sweat. He'd eaten half of it. I couldn't help but start humming. Looking at the teacher, I couldn't help but open my mouth. I recognized his expression, looked around cautiously, and stopped him. Lowering his voice, he asked, "How do you know? How should I know?" The boss's mouth twisted. "You've been saying this for years. The issue of Liu Ruyan is obvious to everyone. Only fools don't notice it." He looked at me. "I was terribly afraid of this cold day. Are these just your fantasies when you read?" "I want to be in your dream." He threw the bamboo stick into the trash. "Liu Ruyan is still single. If you like her, go get her." I shook my head. For a long time, I couldn't comprehend his words. When I came to, I discovered that there was no one in front of me. The old man was gone. I got angry. Couldn't it be said that people like me just know how to save money? I looked at the falling snow. The snow grew thicker. The whole world turned white. The baked sausage glistened with ice. I broke one. In my past life, I often played with them in my hands. I loved warming my hands after a snowfall, then placing them on Liu Ruyan's face when she pretended to be angry, and feeling the paint freeze on my fingers. The ice in my hand was crystal clear as I touched the snow-covered bowl. I wanted to hide unnoticed, but I accidentally bumped into someone I never expected to see. It had been a while since we'd seen each other. Liu Ruyan was standing in the snow. She smiled at me, bowing her head. She tugged at her scarf, revealing her face flushed from the cold. Just a few seconds later, I was ready to admit defeat. A thin layer of snow fell on her hair. "Liu Ruyan, what are you?" I was completely stunned. Why did she suddenly appear here? I froze, looking at the snowflakes on her hair, and couldn't utter a word. People were already skating around the rink. "Wait, Liu Ruyan," she said, looking at me with wide eyes. She looked stunning even with light makeup. Her face was flushed, and it was so cold outside. "Why didn't you take an umbrella? You'll freeze." I almost blurted out too much. Luckily, I bit my tongue in time. All those words remained stuck in my throat. Liu Ruyan glanced at my scorched plate full of snow. And then she looked up at me. The snowflakes on her eyelashes melted, turning into crystal drops. She came closer. My heart skipped a beat. "I came to thank you." "Ah, thank you for what?" I was confused, and suddenly Liu Ruyan took off her scarf and put it on her arm. Baring her white neck, "I came to thank the one who helped me get my wallet back. Thank you for helping my dad with his medication. Thank you to whoever pretended to be a doll and brought me so much joy. Thank you to the person who gave me flowers." She said many words. Every word she said echoed with trepidation in my heart. I was afraid to even look her in the eyes. I opened my mouth, looking straight ahead. Liu Ruyan bowed her head. I glanced at her furtively. Really, you must be mistaken, Liu Ruyan." Before I could finish, her best friend appeared out of nowhere. He held 2 umbrellas in his hands and looked like a detective. He smiled and took out his phone. "Would you like to see the CCTV footage from the alley? Do you want to hear a witness's testimony or check the facts online?" Then he pulled out my former classmate, who was standing a little further away. "Do you need a witness?" I thought about what to say, but all I could do was glance at my classmate. A sparkle gleamed in his eyes. "Liu Ruyan, you're taking on too much." "I was just working there." Yo, you're overthinking things." My friend and classmate were saying the same thing. My jaw dropped. I looked at the guy with my last name. They were so determined. Liu Ruyan laughed as she looked at me. "Look me in the eyes, say it again." "Thank you." My lips felt frozen together. Finally, I panicked. "Don't think too much. I have to go home." I put the bucket on the ground. I wanted to run away, but my hands wouldn't obey. Liu Ruyan caught my hand. I was shocked. She touched me and everything inside me melted. Her hands were as gentle as in my memories. Liu Ruyan pulled my sleeve several times. I realized I couldn't resist. She came very close, pouting her lips in displeasure. She looked disappointed. I wanted to pull my hand away, but the left hand was at a dead end. It didn't move. Liu Ruyan suddenly raised her head, standing on tiptoe. Her eyes sparkled. "You want start a relationship with me?" Such a simple phrase. She took my breath away. I wanted to refuse, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. I must have caught a cold again. I couldn't think of a response. Liu Ruyan's eyes darkened. From her past life experience, I knew she was pretending to be pathetic, usually at times like this. I pinched her cheeks, laughed, and thought, but that's in the past now. I looked at her standing in front of me. I wanted to support her so much. My throat was constricted. I couldn't utter a word when she took my hand. Damn, this is the pinnacle of the beauty industry. I admit I fell into a trap. This technique really works, even though I hid for so long. Finally, the boss couldn't take it anymore and slapped me on the back of the head. "What are you afraid of?" Yes, what am I afraid of? That my voice isn't good enough for her, that it will hinder her academic ideals. I was afraid that if I said yes, Liu Ruyan would get a second chance, which would ruin everything. The boss slapped me on the head again. "Who are you dating anyway?" "I'm asking you, will you hurt her if you are with her?" "No, I'm not that fierce." I watched Liu Ruyan slowly walk toward me, and my head felt like a storm was raging. I nudged the old teacher aside. I hurried towards her and blurted out hesitantly, "Liu Ruyan, do you want to marry me?" Her face instantly flushed from my mere touch. It was so beautiful. Her lips trembled slightly, and she replied, "Yes, I want to." Hearing this, I couldn't help but worry. What if I'm not good enough for you? What if someone dares to offend you? How will you cope with the pregnancy? Liu Ruyan turned around. She looked out the window where her sisters were whispering and teasing us. She nodded obediently to them. Then she turned to me with a worried face and asked, "What should we do now?" And really, what? I remember how I hurried. As soon as the thought of someone hurting her flashed through my mind, I became so furious that I was ready to do anything for her. Liu Ruyan's eyes gleamed. I whispered to myself, if she wants to get married, I'll be the best guy for her. I looked at her happy smile. My heart was pounding like a drum. Finally, a familiar melody began to play, and I held my breaths. "Why are you crying, my love?" Her hand touched my eyes. I didn't even notice how I started crying. Tears were the most honest reaction. I held out my hands. The love I'd dreamed of was finally here. Everything that followed felt like a past life, but the process went surprisingly smoothly. On the day of our engagement, my father-in-law, although he said he was pleased with me, could not hide his irony as he stroked his beard. "Well, we'll see what becomes of you. Who would dare come into our home?" My worries were far greater than his. Liu Ruyan decided to marry me despite all my misgivings. She saw right through me. When I couldn't sleep from worry, she would take my face in her hands and say very tenderly, "I love you, my dear." Who could resist that? We got married. Our wedding day was just like our previous life, but with different feelings. Because of that drunk old man, my father-in-law, my relatives were aware of all the news even before the ceremony began. The guests were our classmates, Liu Ruyan and me, as well as relatives from my father-in-law's side. My classmates were amazed. No one expected me to actually get Liu Ruyan, but the surprise was a success. Everyone sincerely wished us happiness as we raised our glasses. I happened to notice the boss sitting in the corner, furtively wiping away tears. I wanted to laugh at him, but then I saw him drinking and bit my tongue. He noticed me, and then he muttered, "Next time you'll be taking the exam, and stop adding so much chili to your food." I could only smile guiltily. I saw my friend Liu Ruyan again. She was so excited for us. I walked over to help Liu Ruyan and quietly asked, "What is your novel about?" just out of curiosity. Nothing strange. I was managing Liu Ruyan's money and treated her friend to wine, although I made a big mistake starting all this. But Liu Ruyan carried the pregnancy to term. This time, everything was different from my previous life, and that strange feeling never left me. I gently stroked her belly. Yes, everything was just like in a past life. Our home was filled with happiness. Liu Ruyan insisted on having a child, and my father-in-law and mother-in-law supported her. Life became easy thanks to love. It felt like a massive struggle for our common future. No way. From the day we got married, I did everything to keep her safe. I moved the factory to the city where he studied. Everything was organized perfectly. I accompanied her, took care of her daily chores, and fed her on time. Later, I accidentally discovered that the coworkers secretly called me the 24-year-old perfect husband. Wow, that's not a bad title. It would be ideal if I got a reward for this. I was really afraid I wouldn't be able to handle it. But everything went differently than in my previous life. After the birth, I went to her parents. We decided to live together. I even secretly took their phone to keep track of everything. I've been rereading texts on postpartum recovery. Big data is truly a useful thing. Short videos and tips were always at hand under the supervision of the whole family. Liu Ruyan smiles every day genuinely from the heart. In that life, I added a psychologist to WeChat. I secretly reported to him every day about Liu Ruyan's condition. Fortunately, the doctor always said everything was fine. Until after giving birth, all the symptoms of the past life disappeared without a trace. Excellent, my beloved is safe and sound. Liu Ruyan woke up in the hospital room. She saw me and we both laughed. I was scared and reminded her to be careful with the wound. After all, she was the one who gave birth to the child. Why are you crying? Her hand touched my reddened eyes. I couldn't hold back my tears as I looked at her. This life was nothing like the previous painful one. We had been through everything, and now I knew that I had enough experience to make us truly happy. I moved the entire production line directly from the factory to the processing stage. Everything became open and transparent. As a result, the raw materials were truly pure. It caused a bit of a stir, but everything worked out. Oh, and that old problem is a thing of the past. Liu Ruyan and I had a daughter. I was with her 24/7. She held our baby in her arms every day, and that old man never had a chance to get near her. The most important thing is, I was lucky. After the knife incident in my past life, in this one I immediately went to the doctors and then got into advertising. The old man couldn't threaten me anymore. When he showed up again, I threw the commercial certificate in his face and threatened to call the police. He was so scared that he never dared show his face again. After that, I went into a flower shop and bought a book of sunflower seeds. I bought a pot of cacti for my daughter. I didn't expect this from myself. As I was leaving the store, I saw Liu Ruyan holding our little girl in her arms. She took my hand and said, "Little one, look, it's Daddy." Dad brought us flowers. I smiled and walked alongside. I took my daughter from her arms and lightly touched her cheek with the sunflower. "Let's go home, I'll make you dinner." In the evening, I hugged Liu Ruyan before going to bed. Suddenly she kissed me. "What's going on?" I leaned towards her slightly. "I'm so sleepy," she whispered. "I'm sorry about everything that happened in your past life. You had such a hard time with the house and the factory. What happened in your past life?" I just smiled tenderly at her. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her press against me. "No, you were just sick then." Liu Ruyan's gaze suddenly became thoughtful. She looked at her sleeping loved one, unable to contain her emotions. This fool. At the beginning of this life, I really wanted to stay away from her to protect her. Fortunately, she was so stubborn that she didn't let me go. Remembering that pain, Liu Ruyan lost sleep. She got out of bed so as not to disturb my sleep and sat down next to me, taking the phone. Looking through the photos from the amusement park, she found a figurine of the very teddy bear I was back then in every picture. She flipped through the photos one by one. Smiling, she couldn't hold back her tears. Her finger stopped on the last frame. There was a teddy bear looking at the stars. "You're such a fool." It's no wonder that in this life too, I remained in his arms, in her heart. I, dozing nearby, suddenly stirred. I reached out to her without waking up. "Wife, I'm here." I was just in the bathroom. "Oh, come back," listening to myself mutter in my sleep. Liu Ruyan laughed, wiping away her tears. As she put the phone down, her gaze fell on the half-open desk drawer. There was a piece of paper stuck into the book. She subconsciously pulled it out. There were my notes on it, the same old ones, a little worn by time. The paper read: Step 1, a plan to retreat from the point where Liu Ruyan was. Step 2, starting a business early. As for Step 3, it was empty, apparently. This is the same fool who couldn't think it through to the end. I was a bad student at school, everything was hard for me. This plan. The words on the paper were written carelessly, like a chicken's scratch. Liu Ruyan smiled and shook her head. She carefully placed the sheet of paper back into the book and put it away in the drawer. I opened my eyes, still half awake. And again he reached out to her. He hugged his beloved. My moon is in my arms again.